Get this going. What is up? Welcome, friends. Hello. Happy Sunday night. I've got October 30th here on the East Coast. I know a couple of y'all, it's technically Monday morning for you now. It's wee hours of the evening. I appreciate you coming to hang out with me. Um, my name is Whitney, or Whit. I actually know several of you. I've seen several of you today, even. Um, but hello, I am a GMAT, GRE, and EA instructor here at Manhattan Prep, and it is my pleasure to get to hang out with you tonight for our free GMAT Prep Hour. If you are here live, yay. If you are finding us on the recording, also yay. It's good to have you here on our YouTube channel. Yeah. So let's go. Everybody in the room's ready. I'm ready. Let's do it. So here we are. We are in a GMAT free prep hour. I had to remind myself that a little bit. I was like, wait, what are we doing tonight? Oh, that's right. We're doing GMAT. I have been doing GMAT math all day today. Today, I saw a couple of you. We were in a gigantic Foundations of Math course, which was awesome. If you have not taken our Foundations of Math course, it is free. Come take it. Come get online. Join us. It's great. But for this next hour, just shy of an hour, we are talking about sentence correction. Now, I have decided that there just really is not an organized enough, deep dive enough, focused enough free prep hour on sentence correction. That's not true. We've got a bunch of sentence correction ones, but I wanted to do things a little differently. And so I'm going to start us off on kind of a series of these that I'll be doing over the next few months. But I wanted to start tonight, yay, with what I'll argue is the true bedrock or foundation of what it means to crush at sentence correction. And so for folks that come to the Foundations of Math course, I say the same thing. If you want to get a really high quant score, your foundations of math, like understanding how to think about numbers, understanding how to approach numbers, and your intuition around numbers has to be high, very, very high, right? And so we call it a Foundations of Math course, but we're actually training you to have good intuition. Well, I'm going to talk about this a little bit like a foundations of sentence correction, not because what we're doing is easy, because what we're going to do tonight will not be easy. In fact, we will be dealing with some hefty, very complex, very dense sentences. But it is foundational in the sense that if I want to get fast at sentence correction and I want to start being able to like rapid go after, oh, that's parallelism, that's pronouns, that's verbs, that's modifiers, that's this. I really have to get my process and my first read of the original sentence, I have to get that on lockdown. Right? So this is a class for everybody, not just like I'm not feeling great at sentence correction. This is also for that I'm feeling awesome at sentence correction, but I still am missing a couple here and there. So we will talk just very briefly. I will introduce our 4-step sentence correction method. And we actually have a free Interact lesson. So if you go to our website and you sign up for free GMAT Interact trial, you actually get like a whole lesson on just the methodology, the 4-step methodology of sentence correction. So I'm going to invite you to go there. That lesson's great. You actually get to see me. I don't know if you see me in some of that. I have a lot of hair. I had very long hair at that point. But tonight, once we sort of just like quick acknowledge the 4-step process, what we're really going to dig in on is deconstructing sentences. So that means, what is the core? What is my subject? What is my verb? What are the weird versions of subject verb? How do I figure out what a sentence actually means? Like, what is the author trying to say? And how can I start to extract all the pieces so I can tell that everything means what it's supposed to mean, it's in the right place, right? And everything works as it should. Along with those basic core structures, as we think about them, we'll talk about punctuation, because I'll be honest, punctuation is tested on the GMAT. Maybe not to as high a degree as things like subject, verb, or modifier replacement, but it is important that we're at least familiar with what different punctuation does. And then we're going to speak about some common modifiers tonight, about how to spot them and read around them, kind of work with them. But for this lesson, we are not going to get very far into really diagnosing deeply a lot of the modifier placement stuff. We'll kind of touch on it, but that'll be our next lesson. Will be a kind of deeper dive into understanding, now that I can tear a sentence apart, Once I start putting it back together, what's this modifier doing? Is it in the right place? Should I be using a different modifying form? And so on. By the end of this, what I would like to have for you is a list of markers. So markers are basically signals that the test is testing a specific thing. So we have parallelism markers, like either or. So if I see the word either or, I immediately think, oh, this is testing parallelism. Or if I see the word which, it's going to be one of our markers today, I know, oh, that's a modifier. That's a noun descriptor. Okay, got it. Or if I see a pronoun, it's a marker for pronouns. So I'll have a list of markers that you are going to practice spotting in the real world. And I'd like for us to have a cheat sheet about structure for you. So you can walk away from sentence correction and go, okay, here's what I need to know about structure. Here's my cheat sheet. I can go to the sentence correction strategy guide. I can go to the official guide. I can go to anybody else's strategy guides for sentence correction. And I can kind of fill in any of the holes grammatically that I'm not totally sure about. Yeah. And then we're going to spend some time deconstructing sentences along the way. So yeah. So in Donald's excitement, I'm going to kind of reinvigorate. Let's do this thing. Let's get after it. So little bit about a 4-step process, or our process, if you will, of sentence correction. So I'm going to give us a sort of silly sentence. We're going to go with like one that's just, I'll be honest, like way too easy for y'all. So this is an example of a sentence correction. All right. We've got a sentence at the top, some portion of which is underlined. And then we've got 5 answer choices below. Now, the bit at the top, that's we'll call that the original sentence. So some portion of it may be underlined. All of it could be underlined, right? We're going to call that the original sentence because when in doubt, that's where we'll go to assess original meaning. So what did the author want to say? And then it's also useful to call it the original sentence because it is answer choice A. So answer choice A is what's in this blank at the top. Now answer choices B through E, these are all going to be different in some way from one another. So there is traditionally going to be a difference at the beginning in at least one of the answer choices, and a difference within the last like 2 words of each answer choice. So occasionally the very last word might be the exact same, but maybe the last 2 words, something like the second to last word is different. Or punctuation between the last 2 words is different. So there'll be some difference kind of at the end, a difference at the beginning, and then, you know, who knows, lots of differences in the middle. Yeah. Our job is not to find the right answer. Does anybody know what our job is? What's our job for sentence correction? What do y'all think? What is our job? If our job is not to find the right answer, what is that? Yes, I love that. Daniel, our job is process of elimination. Our job is to find 4 wrong answers, right? 4 wrong answers. And I want to sort of show you why that's my job, right? Like why that is more important as our job instead of like, oh, let me find the right answer. So I'm going to give you a quick little pop quiz. We've got 4 sentences in this pop quiz. We'll come back to the one on the screen, fear not. But we've got 4 sentences in this pop quiz. And what I want to know is, are any of these right? All of them? None of them? Some of them? Right? So I want you to message me privately. Do you think any of them are right? And if so, which one are ones? And we'll call them, you know, A, B, C, and D. Okay, starting to see some ideas coming in. What do y'all think? Are any of them okay? Okay, I love what I'm seeing right now. I'm getting a lot of like, okay, well, I think B is wrong. I think D is wrong. I think they're all wrong. I mean, I guess if I had to, maybe C is okay. Maybe D is right. Oh, God, I don't know. Right? Very slow. Very slow. What if I now said, just kidding, y'all? There are 3 wrong answers and 1 correct answer. Now, if you had to guess, there are 3 wrong answers and 1 right answer. Which one would you now say is the right answer? There we go. And now all of a sudden, right, answer choices are flooding in. And so you're exactly right. C is our correct answer here. Now, if I hadn't known that one of them was right, choosing a right answer isn't always going to feel good. What's really, really amazing about sentence correction is that for sure, only one of them works, which more importantly means 4 of them have something wrong. So my job is to find something wrong that I can count on. So I really would like, while I'm practicing, not to just lean on, I mean, that one doesn't sound good, or this one sounds good. What I'd like to work on as we work through some of these topics is what are rules that I can trust to say, yeah, that's not right. That's not right. That can't be, that, no, that's not good. Yeah. And so, as many of you said, A, B, and D are wrong. These are testing a variety of issues. We have a pronoun issue in A that isn't clear as to whether it points back to Tom or Adam. Like, who did the crying? Structure would probably imply that Tom was the one doing the crying because of Tom beat, he cried, like subject, verb, but it might make more sense logically if Adam cried because he's the one that lost. So there's some ambiguity there. We've also got an issue with the verb tense, went and will buy. If I did something yesterday, will buy is future tense, so that's no good. And then with D, we've got a descriptor, a WH, that is sitting next to the only noun that it could modify in this sentence, which would be the boy. And I don't think the boy was barking and wagging his tail at the dog. Maybe he was. Maybe it's like proverbial tail. Right? So there's a problem there. C may not be the way I would write that sentence. I may not say before buying a new car, Aaron researched prices online. I might instead say before she bought a new car, Aaron researched prices online. Before she, or Aaron researched prices online before buying a new car. Or Aaron researched prices online before she bought a new car. I might change the order. I might change the structure from sort of a descriptor to a subject verb. We'll talk more about that in a second. But it's technically okay. There's no problem. And for sure, the other ones are bad. So it's going to leave me being like, I don't know. I mean, C's left. I killed everything else. So here we go. So this idea of can't, who barked and wagged, jumped over boy, and modified dog. Okay, so we are not going to talk a ton about noun placement, noun modifier placement, but I will talk about noun modifier placement a tiny bit. Just note that while a noun modifier likes to touch its noun, you are exactly right, Jaideep, that it can sort of squeak past the immediate noun, particularly if there's a comma. However, in the mission to do that, it cannot jump over a verb. Played is in the way. So if this had been the dog played with a boy who lives next door, comma, blah, 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 right? I can jump over a tiny descriptor to get to the noun that I'm trying to talk about, but I can't move to the entire other side of the verb. Okay, I hope that, right? So who can't jump over played in this sentence? Okay, I'm hoping that. Correct. Because once I've moved to the other side of a verb, I'm now on a different, right? Like if I'm having to go through a verb, I need a different kind of modifier to do that. I need an adverbial modifier. And instead, I should just place this better. We don't want to leave. So let's think about this for a minute. And maybe this will be this. I'm actually really glad you're bringing this up. No, like the reason is that placement of a noun modifier is all about logic. And noun modifiers, I had a great kind of quote that a teacher told me once in college that was, noun modifiers are like teenagers. They're going to fall in love with like whatever you put them next to. So make sure you put them next to something appropriate. And so noun modifiers will try to modify what they're sitting next to. And so if you move its noun too far away, you lose the clarity. And so we might sit around and say, like, what are all these arbitrary rules? Like all these crazy rules. But the fact is that grammar isn't meant to be arbitrary. Grammar is meant to help us out. Right? Like the goal of grammar is to try and make things clear. And so if I start moving my noun too far away, there's a decent chance I'm going to start losing some of my readers. They're going to be like, wait, I don't want people to have to stop and then mind read to figure out what I was talking about. I'm just going to write a better sentence, right? Like I'm just going to move the pieces of my sentence around because I can, I'm allowed to. I'm going to move the pieces of my sentence around so that the thing I'm trying to describe is more clearly being described. You could absolutely, I love, right? In order to fix D, a way to fix D would be the dog, I could use a comma or not here. The dog who barked and wagged his tail played with the boy. Again, comma or not comma would be fine in that case. I could even say barking and wagging his tail, the dog played with the boy. Or I could say the boy played with the dog, comma, who barked and wagged his tail. There's absolutely no reason why the dog had to come first. The boy could have come first, right? So the thing to note is there are often a lot of ways to fix a sentence. On test day, it's not our job to fix sentences. On test day, it's our job to evaluate what we've been given and say, is this clear? And if we're not sure, we leave it. And if like we're like, oh, I'm not sure, but I find another choice that seems more clear or moves things around to make it more clear, then I'm going to strictly dominate or eliminate the one that was squishier. Because at the end of the day, there is like for some of these rules, not the ones we're doing tonight, but for some of the rules, there is kind of a squishiness to it. And modifiers are big time squishy. Like, I don't know, does it need to go here? Could it go there? There's a lot of wiggling and moving that is allowed. And then sometimes there's like the point where it's like, no, you've wiggled it too far. Now we're confused. Right? Now we're not sure anymore. You put it too far. You put it in the wrong place. So what I would say in that case is we're looking for other issues then. Just because you see a difference doesn't mean you have to act on it. And that's what we're absolutely going to be talking about over the course of these like sort of sentence correction lessons is just because something is different doesn't mean you have to act on it. Now, I did want to highlight that this isn't a test of do you know a bunch of arbitrary grammar rules, right? Like I know it feels like that, but it really is more of a do you have comfort with the majority of the grammar rules that have a deep impact on meaning? Right? Like I don't want my reader to constantly have to stop and be like, I think I know what you mean. I want to be pretty explicit. Like I'm saying what I mean. And so we are going to be a little more formal because the GMAT's testing formal grammar. But the fact is still that all we're doing in grammar is to try and facilitate meaning. And so the various issues that we'll be looking at, so tonight, subject-verb agreement, some connecting punctuation, a sort of like dip into modifiers, but then coming up, we'll talk modifiers, we'll talk parallelism and comparisons, like how do I deal with lists? What about pronouns? Like how do I point back and refer back to earlier nouns or later nouns? And then we've got things like weird verb tense, like how do I get myself organized and when do I use certain verbs and when do I not? Idioms show up throughout. The good news is that the GMAT has worked really hard to try and move away from American-centric idioms that don't impact meaning. That said, all of the questions that you'll see in any official practice material are all old. The vast majority of released questions, even those in practice exams and in official guide books, are at this point 15 to 17 years old. They're still from a version of the test where idioms and American idioms were quite highly tested. So just know that you are still going to run across questions that are testing things in ways that the GMAT themselves, GMAC, has said they're not doing anymore. So we're just going to trust that they're lightening up on the more, again, like just American idiom that doesn't have a, is it supposed to be estimated to be, or is it estimated at? Like, who really cares? That doesn't have as big of an impact. But something like given by versus given to, right? That idiom, if something was given by someone, that's who gave it away. If something was given to someone, that's who it was given to. So we do have idiomatic use of things like prepositions for a very specific meaning. Or we say either or, we don't say either and. Because either implies I can choose one or the other, and would mean I have both. So there are still going to be these idiomatic phrases that have an impact on the meaning of the sentence, but we're moving away from some of the ones that seem to be much more just like nuanced for no reason, which is a good thing, which is a very, very good thing. Okay, so let's head back to our kind of like basic little sentence that we started with and get some of this out of the way so we have a little time. So in terms of our 4-step process, we're going to spend the majority of our time on steps 1 and 2. Well, really step 2. But let me just highlight for you what steps 1 and 2 are. And again, if you want like a deep dive into this 4-step process, our free GMAT Interact trial has like an 30-minute, hour-long lesson or so just on methodology and sort of process. So I want to encourage you there. But just to give you the kind of big picture of it, when we start thinking of our process, step 1 of our 4-step process is going to be a first glance. And so we do this for quant and for verbal. The goal in first glance is to give yourself a chance to just sit back and take it all in. So for first glance, you would notice how long the underline is, where is it placed? Is it like the beginning of the sentence, the end of the sentence? How long is the whole sentence? How similar are the answer choices? So I kind of sweep my eyes. I'm not looking for actual splits. People will talk about that, but I just sweep my eye and I'm trying to notice if things are in roughly similar places. I see like words like better and best, climate, warm, ones. Things seem relatively ordered here. And then I will give it a quick kind of vertical scan for splits at the start and at the end of the underline. So grow, grows, grow, and are growing, or are best grown rather. And then we've got like warm, warmer happening at the end. So maybe some things with comparisons. So sometimes a first glance can give us a lot of information. Here's what I'll say. A first glance gives us a lot more information when we have a deeper pocket of grammar tools, right? So yes, the splits are super important, but what I'd love to see you start to do is, as again, we start to build this like cheat sheet, and what we're going to work on for the next 35 minutes or so is how can I start to deconstruct sentences? What are the things that could go wrong in a sentence? And how are those going to show up in my underlined portion? How will I notice them in my answer choices? So first glance, we're just sort of taking in what we take in. Step 2 is going to be that kind of like foundational piece for us to get better at sentence correction. And this is our read the original. So this is our first read, if you will. Now, if you go to our materials, we say read for meaning. And I agree with that. That said, I'm going to present a bit more of a nuanced approach to that. And so I'm going to read the original. The first thing I'm looking for is I'm looking for the core structure, because that's going to give me the basic meaning. I'm going to rip out all the descriptors. So I'm reading in many ways around modifiers so that I can kind of see like, what is the core of the sentence? What are they actually trying to say? Like, what's actually happening here? Once I have my core structure in place, I will then, so first around modifiers, then I'm going to put mods back in place. And then what does that mean, right? How does that help my meaning to get my modifiers back in place? And along the way, I'm going to take note of things like, do I see parallelism or comparison structures? Do I see other markers like pronouns? Do I see weird verb tenses? So my first read is to understand, like, what's the core structure. But I do want to say, like, whoa, that was a pronoun. Okay, I don't want to forget that. Okay, cool. Okay. How are we feeling? All right. Once we've read the original, now we would move into steps 3 and 4, which we really won't be focusing as much on tonight, right? Step 3 is where we find a starting point, and this is something where I want you to feel like you know how to handle it. So this doesn't mean just like find a difference or find an issue. I mean, find a place where you believe you can do work from a place of knowledge. Like, oh, yeah, I know that this is a subject verb mismatch. Oh, okay, this is not how you use this semicolon. This is not how a pronoun is used in this context, or the pronoun is confusing, or the modifier is in the wrong place, or whatever. We're looking for something that we would be willing to bet on a little bit. I don't want my first move, ideally, to be something that I wouldn't put $50 down on. Like I'd want to put down a substantial, like, yeah, I feel like I'm comfortable with this issue. Once we found a starting point, and then again, this will be something we'll sort of tackle a little later in this series. But the last thing we really want to think about is eliminate everything you can based on that issue. And for me, I like to kind of, give my students hell when we're working together, but I'm like focused, right? Like stay on task. Because one of the things that happens to my students is they'll find an issue that feels like gold, or it feels like silver, right? Like maybe it doesn't feel like gold, but it feels like silver, and they feel pretty good about it. They'll get to a sentence, they'll start to eliminate, but then they'll kind of be looking out to see if there's anything better. And so that constant distraction for like, well, maybe there's something a little bit better, usually means that they do a very poor job of assessing the silver issue that they found. Okay, fine, it's not gold, maybe it's even bronze, right? Like, but if you're like, I do feel pretty good about this rule, if worse comes to worse and you're not sure, but you're like, let's say it's a bronze, you don't call it a gold level issue, it's like a bronze level issue. What I would do then is I would have my A, B, C, D, E on my paper. And if I'm like, ugh, I might just make marks next to the letters. And if I saw something along the way, I'm going to note it, but I'm going to finish doing what I just did. Then I can go back for it. Okay? But my goal is for my first issue to be silver or higher, right? I want a silver or gold issue on my first pass. If I've got 2 or 3 answer choices left after my silver or gold pass and I'm not sure what the heck to do, great, I'm going to make a guess. But I do want to try and amass enough skill with grammar that on that first true pass through, I'm working with something I feel relatively confident about. Okay, so let's take this like little silly baby sentence and go, okay, first glance, short underline. It's at the end of a very, very short sentence. In fact, there's very little in front of the underline. My answer choices look quite similar. I have my difference in grow and grows at the beginning, which is meaningful to me because when you add an S and take it away, we're talking about some sort of maybe like subject verb or referring back to number. So this is all about number of something. And at the end, warm versus warmer is also meaningful to me, only that it's like a different descriptor. Now, I don't know which one's right. In either case, I have no idea which one's right. But they both seem like something that is a distinction that I might feel comfortable with. If neither of them did, that's fine. It doesn't matter because I'm going to go read the original sentence anyways. None of it matters. Yeah, for sure. Best versus better is another split. Cool versus cooler is another split. Rather than and as opposed to. These are all things that you can work based on. Yeah, they're all fine. Right? I mean, the fact is that for most sentences, there's a bunch of stuff being tested. Usually there's a couple, like 1 to 2 issues that are like the gold medal, meaning that they're much more. So I call something gold when it's mathematical in nature, like subject-verb agreement, right? That there is a, like, single goes with singular and plural goes with plural. I start getting into places like bronze when I'm like, okay, verb tense. Like, I know my verb tenses, but verb tenses have some squishiness around them. Like, it depends on when I'm allowed to use that, right? So same with better versus best, warm versus warmer, right? Better versus best is a more clear split than warmer versus warm. Warmer versus warm feels a little like maybe word choice, whereas in best versus better has a meaning difference if you're familiar with it. But you may not, that's fine. So we're going to go read the original sentence. So what we're going to focus our attention on for the rest of this evening is how do we get in here and break down our core with a little bit of modifiers back in place. Okay, that's the goal. How do we break down our core? So I'm going to start to read, and I'm looking for subjects. I'm looking for the verbs that logically connect, and I have to read around descriptors. So this sentence starts with what looks to be a noun or nouns, carrots and beets, like that's subject material. And since it's two nouns connected with an and, that makes them plural. Okay, so a compound subject is plural. So I've got my compound subject. My trick for core, subject verb, is that when I've got singular or plural, I replace it with the pronoun it or they, so that my ear now can be more powerful. So I am going to replace this for now, while I'm just trying to figure out my sentence. They grow best in cooler climates rather than warm ones. So my main sentence is they grow best in one situation more than another. That's what my sort of general construction is. They grow best works. I noted along the way that I have some sort of comparison, a rather than or an as or a like. Okay, great. I noted when I saw the answer choices that the first word was a choice between singular and plural. And so now I'm going to go up against all my answer choices with they. They grow, not they grows, versus they are best grown. Those all work. The rest of what we're working with in this sentence is all about the comparison, and is all about whether we say like best or better. And if I've got they grow best in cooler rather than warm, so, if we were doing this lesson on parallelism, cooler rather than warm isn't parallel. They grow better in cooler than in warmer, or they are best grown in cooler as. They are not, we don't use the idiom best as. And then cooler and warmer might match, but we use best when we're comparing three or more things. We use better, comparative, when we compare two. So notice I had a couple of other issues that had to come into play to be able to deal with the remaining three answer choices. All of that would leave me on correct answer, D. But what I care about is, can I deconstruct my sentence and get, carrots and beets are. They are. Right? That's my goal. They are. All right. So we are going to play with some crazy sentences. That's my plan. Okay. So I'm going to give you a really dumb, sentence example. So don't laugh too hard. Here we go. So what we're looking for is to try and find what is the core of this sentence. And so when I refer to the core of a sentence, I refer to the subject verb or multiple subject verbs. I also refer to any necessary extensions, and we'll talk about the most important one, the most common one, is what happens when I have a subject, I, a verb, suggest, followed by the word that. So when the word that follows a verb, those are crucial extensions. So that after a verb is a core structure. Yep. So, and I'll go over that at the end, Jaideep, since that's a different subject. But Cooler and warm are adjectives, but they aren't of the same form. Like I wouldn't say cool environments and warm environments. I would say cooler and warmer, or cool and warm, either. But what I'd like for y'all to do on this one is send me a message privately. What do you think the core subject and verb or verbs of this sentence are? What do y'all think? Okay, that's one of them. Okay, so far, if you've typed to me, you've only found part of it. You've only found part of the core. I know. Still not quite there. Still missing pieces. Oh my goodness. This is why, right? Okay. So when we're looking for the core of a sentence, yes. Okay. So what we're doing when we're looking for the core of the sentence, and let me give it back to y'all so that you can type to everybody. I had it set to just typing to me. But notice we've got an avid reader of science fiction. That sounds like a subject. Right? It sounds like a subject, at least. An avid reader of science fiction lives next door. Yeah, that would be a sentence. Totally fine. Right? That's a subject. An avid reader. So I've got an avid reader of science fiction. Okay, that's kind of descriptor. So we're going to start to list out, and let me actually make a little space over here. We're going to list out some of our common descriptors. Aha! Donald, you found it. You found the other part of it. Very nice. Yeah. So we're going to start to look for our common descriptors. A big one will be prepositional phrases. Okay, so these are all of our, and a fellow instructor called them the squirrel to a tree words. In the tree, on the tree, around the tree, for the tree, by the tree, near the tree, under the tree, to the tree, so on, right? Of the tree, blah, blah, blah. All these little baby words, right? These directional words. So I can start to kind of move some of these out of the way. So an avid reader of science fiction, an avid reader and nature lover. Okay, so we've got two what sound like subjects. Okay, we've got another common modifier. So we're going to call these relative pronouns. Okay, so these are the things that we're trying to spot. So our prepositional phrases. We've got our relative pronouns. These are that, which, who, when, where, whom. Did I do when? Yeah. You can do why as well, but yeah, we'll throw why in there for fun. Now note that this is, relative pronouns are kind of special. So relative pronouns aren't necessarily a part of the core. That said, a couple of little special notes here. That, after a verb, is what I like to call these like extenders. It's a necessary extension. So I'll call that part of the main core. I'll also note that all relative pronouns have an internal core of their own. Okay, so note to self, we've got some complex stuff happening with relative pronouns. And we'll kind of mess with those in a minute, but for now, just keep that in track. So I've got an avid reader of science fiction and nature lover who rock climbs and stand-up paddleboards. Wit, oh God. Okay, so this whole piece up front is a descriptor offset by commas. So another thing we can often be on the lookout for is offset by commas, anything. So a lot of times at the beginning of the sentence as well, particular, can be at the start and end of the sentence. I can spell. I know it. I'm certain of it. Right? So offset by commas, so stuff that we have kind of like, that's what this whole business turns out to be. This is all one big descriptor. So many of you found Whit teaches. What does she teach? She teaches the GMAT. So that's my object. This is my core is subject, verb, object. Subject, verb, object. Whit teaches the GMAT by day. By day meaning descriptor, a little prepositional phrase. Commas, educating the MBAs of tomorrow. All right, so we're going to mark this guy out. Boop, boop, boop. We've got our by day that we'll get rid of, or excuse me, we'll do that in blue. So Whit teaches the GMAT. And prowls, what? The city. She prowls the city by night in search of grammatical errors on store signs and subway ads. Those are all prepositions. So the core of this sentence is actually a compound verb. So Whit teaches the GMAT. So glad this is not a spelling test. And prowls, creepily, the city. I should really pick another verb for this. Yeah? So my core is that Whit teaches the GMAT and prowls the city. Once I know that, I go back and I start to figure out, are the modifiers in the right place? So note that they're always relative pronoun clauses. And a relative pronoun clause is always technically subordinate. So there is no such thing as when they are relative versus subordinate. Those are the same thing. Yep. So what we've got is a situation where, and we'll talk about what to do when we have to deal with the core of a relative pronoun. But basically what we're thinking about in terms of sentences are, what are all the subjects and verbs? Do they have partners? Does everything line up? Right? Is everything where it's supposed to be? And does it make sense? And does the sentence even make sense? Do I have any idea what the heck is going on in this crazy sentence? Okay, so let's imagine that I have the following example. We're going to try out some variations on sentences. So let's go. We're going to use me and my teaching of the GMAT. Here we go. Here we go. All right. So let's try some mixed cores here. All right. What do y'all think of this sentence? Pretty good? I mean, it's a limited little sentence, but how's it read? Is it a complete thought? Yeah, it works. Works. Whit, subject, teaches, verb, the GMAT object. Okay. What about this version? You don't have a verb. This is a sentence fragment. This is wrong. All right. So this is a sentence fragment. This is currently acting as a modifier. So I could say something like, Whit teaching the GMAT is funny to watch. Now that's become, like, Whit is funny to watch. Whit, while she's teaching the GMAT, that's what's funny to watch. Or I can fix it by actually making that a verb, putting the word is in there. It is. Whit teaching the GMAT is pretty hilarious. In my humble opinion. Right? But I could change this, and I fixed it. I fixed it now. Look at me go. Into Whit is teaching Killer the GMAT. So sometimes ing words, not sometimes, lots of times, ing verbs need a helping word to be a verb. When they don't have a helping word, they are often behaving as adjectives or adverbs. That's a real sentence. Whit taught the GMAT, period. That's a complete sentence. It's a simple past tense. Oh, wow. So is taught a gerund? No, not in that case. That's a verb there. You know through usage. So for example, because past tense, you're using a weird one, but let's just look at a past tense in general, right? So the dog carried carried his food bowl across the yard. That sounds like my dog's for sure. I should say her then. I'm gonna correctly gender my dogs because they're sweet. So the dog carried her food bowl across the yard. The dog carried by its owner is sleepy. Carried away is a state she often finds herself in. And correct, Daniel. The core has to be a standalone sentence. Thank you for saying that. I should have said that, and I appreciate you saying that. Thank you. So notice the word carried in these three scenarios. I have now used the word carried in all three of its forms. I've used the participle, the past participle, in all three of its forms. I've used it as a verb. I've used it as an a noun modifier. And I've also used it as a noun or a subject or a gerund, if you want to call it that. I just don't always love to use, techie words. But how do I know the difference? Because so the real question here is who did what? That's a sentence, right? A sentence answers the question, who did what? Not sure. The dog was carried by its owner is past tense. And yes, it's passive, but it doesn't matter. Passive versus active for the GMAT's not really a worthwhile endeavor because they don't care. But what I've got is the dog carried. So I'd ask the question, is that a thing? The dog carried something? Yes. In this sentence, the dog actually carried something. The dog carried her food bowl, right? So there's subject, verb, object. Where did she carry it? She carried it across the yard. Great. Good for her. In this sentence, did the dog carry something? The dog carried by? No. The dog, what did the dog do in this sentence? The dog is sleepy in this sentence. This verb-like structure is actually an adjective. It's a descriptor. It's a noun modifier, adjectival modifier. Right? So carried in this sense is a descriptor. It's not the verb. And how do we know the difference? Because of meaning. The dog carried in this situation doesn't make sense. Now, in the last one, there's my verb, carried away, so to speak, is the subject here. It's like a noun state, essentially. So the same thing happens with ing. Right? So I could say the dog swimming in the pond, or the dog is swimming. That's why ing are usually easier because we get the helping verb. The dog is swimming or was swimming with the ducks. I could also say the dog swimming with the ducks is adorable. I could also say swimming is good exercise for dogs. How do we know that swimming is the verb in the first one, but not in the next two? Meaning, right? There's often this tendency, and I get it too, especially when you're trying to work with a non-native language, of like scripting out the rules. But sometimes the easiest way to figure out the rule is to ask, like, what's actually supposed to be happening here? Right? The dog was swimming Okay, what the dog subject was swimming. Preposition with the ducks. The dog is adorable. I wouldn't say the dog swimming with the ducks, period. Right? The other way you can test it is by sticking the dog swimming with the ducks. No. The dog is swimming with the ducks. Oh, yeah. The dog swimming with the ducks is adorable. Oh, there's my verb. There it went. Swimming, subject, is good exercise. Okay? Feeling okay-ish? Yeah, I would argue though that the was carried, were carried, has carried, has had carried, have carried. There's a lot of different forms. The confusion comes with past tense, but it's still the same, right? If I thought I could end this sentence right there, I would ask, is that a complete sentence? The dog carried by its owner. No, because if I say the dog carried, I'm like, the dog carried something. Carried is a thing I have to do. Right? So I would need like the dog carried the bone found. Well, the bone didn't find anything. It could be the bone was found by someone, or it could be the bone found in the yard was my dog's. So we're still going to look for, I want you to get back to the meaning, because without that looking for meaning, it will always be really confusing. You'll be having to keep like a bajillion rules in your head that'll always have, just like most languages, exceptions. Okay, so what about, right? We know that's fine. We've got subject, verb, object, and subject, or a second verb, object. Okay, let's get to a weirder one. What's happening in this sentence? What do we got in this sentence? So that becomes the question, Donald. Notice, is it that students know me? Am I the object? Students know Whitney. I like the guess it's not parallelism, though. This is one of your markers for the week. Right? This is one of the things I want you to practice. We've got a situation of students know something. But according to this sentence, it's not that students know me. It's not that students know me. What do they know about me? So another example of this might be, my sister knows that President Obama will be signing autographs at the State House this week, or will be giving a speech. Let's go there. Giving a speech at the State House this week. Does my sister know President Obama? What do you think? No, not necessarily. At least we don't know that she knows Obama, right? She might, but we don't know that she does. We are not aware that she does. What we know is that my sister knows that something. That makes that really hard to see. My sister knows that. When we connect, and so this is the thing I mentioned before, when we connect a verb to the word that, we create a necessary extension by creating what's called an object clause. Okay, so what we've got here is an object clause. The that, which is a relative pronoun as a part of speech. In this case, when the word that is used next to a verb, it now says that the object isn't just Whit teaches the GMAT or Whit is teaching the GMAT. It would be like changing this to say Whit teaches that the GMAT is an approachable test. It's now not that Whit teaches the GMAT, which is true. The object is now this whole clause. Notice it is its own clause. The GMAT is. It's got its own subject and verb. So my sister knows that President Obama will be giving, that's all one word, all the verb, will be giving what? In this case, a speech. There's the object. So what do students know? Students may not know me, but what they do know is that I teach the GMAT. Yes. So we have to include that. If you omit that, it's common in kind of normal speech to omit the that after the verb, but it actually creates a ton of confusion. Because if I extended the sentence any further, so for example, if I said my sister knows President Obama, comma, and then had some big long descriptor telling you more about President Obama, and then finally said will be giving a speech, you would be confused. So just take this one as the rule that if I have a verb followed by that, it is a necessary that. It's because if I want my object, the object of my verb, if I need that to be a complex thought, so if I need that to be a clause, I have to use that to create it. Otherwise, the implication is that the object will always be a simple noun or prepositional phrase. Okay, so objects are always nouns, prepositional phrases, right? So the dog carried by its owner, right? So there's like, or sorry, where did I have one? Here's one. So the dog carried her food bowl, noun. Whit teaches the GMAT, noun. Let me give you an example. We can also use prepositional phrases as our objects. So subject, Whit, verb, wants, object, prepositional phrase. So objects can be nouns. The objects can be prepositional phrases. So if I said the dog was carried by its owner, so the by its owner is sort of like, it's more of like an adverb in this case, but point is I can use nouns, prepositions, or if I included that, a complex thought. Okay. So let's start building our cheat sheet a little bit of the things that you want to begin to practice. Okay. So what you want to make sure that you are practicing for your cheat sheet is you want to be practicing the basic core forms. So this is, we'll go subject. Let me make this a little smaller. We'll go subject, verb, object, where in this case, the object can be a noun or prepositional phrase. Or, let me get this out of the way. I can have one be subject, verb, that, subject, verb. And by the way, I don't always have to have an object. Not all sentences have one. My sister bakes. Okay, so those are kind of two mega forms. Now, we also have forms that involve, say, a semicolon. So if I have a semicolon, that creates two complete sentences. So subject, verb, object, semicolon, subject, verb, object is allowed if I want it. The same thing can be true with subject, verb, object, comma, and subject, verb, object. Now, in this case, the comma and can be one of an entire class of words that we call coordinating conjunctions. So you'll want to go and learn these. So add these to your marker list. Okay. Now I'm going to, before we sign off, I'll tell you what I want you to do with your markers. So I'm going to make another little list of markers. You can find these all over the place, but the first of the markers, relative pronouns. So these are that in particular, which, who, when, where, why, and whom. Yep, we're going to get to colons in just a second. So relative pronouns. Another set of markers, prepositional phrases. And you can Google. I would highly recommend that you Google to find a list, but in, on, of, for, by, near, under, around, to, and so on. Note that the word to has multiple uses. It's not always a preposition. It is sometimes part of a verb form called the infinitive. The third one would be coordinating conjunctions. So we call something coordinating because it brings two equals or two peers together. It coordinates the schedule of two peers. Okay, so coordinating conjunctions, when you Google them, are the fanboys, that's what they're called, which stands for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. These have to be used with a comma. Have to. Comma and, comma but. My sister bakes cakes, comma, but no one wants to eat them. Which is, that's patently false. People love her cakes. Yeah. So we've also got words like although, subject, verb, object, comma, subject, verb, object. These are what we call subordinating conjunctions. I'm saying all these things so you can Google them and look up a list of them. You can also find these in our book. But you can also, again, just as easily Google for a list of them. We call things subordinating conjunctions. So these are words like because, since, although, despite, before, there's a bunch. After. So we call them subordinating conjunctions because technically, and this doesn't actually matter for the GMAT, but when we use a semicolon, so in this case, we got the semicolon. When we use a semicolon, what we're saying is that the sentence both before and after have to be complete sentences, and they're on equal footing. They're both independent. They can both stand on their own. Coordinating conjunction is saying the same thing, that the two sentences, both before and after the coordinating conjunction, are complete thoughts that can stand on their own. A subordinating conjunction technically means the same thing, that if it's being used as a subordinating conjunction, the completeness still needs to be two independent subject verbs. Again, if it's being used. Sometimes although is used in a weird form as a modifier. But point is that for the most part, what I'm looking for is still two complete thoughts. However, the part that's attached now to the subordinator is technically a descriptor now. It is no longer its own sentence thought all by itself. They're no longer peers. The thing attached to the subordinator is now in service of the other part of the sentence. In terms of what you and I are doing on the test, though, and evaluating subject-verb agreement, it doesn't matter. It does not matter that in terms of checking for the core, it is still the case that this has to make logical sense. Now, I have seen sentences switch out a subordinator for a coordinator, and now that changes meaning, right? Also because although and just mean different things. But point is that when I'm checking for a core, I'm checking for the core in all of these pieces. Okay, so I'll highlight this guy. That here is what we would call an object clause. We use that by creating verb plus that. Actually, I'll do that in blue so it's easier to see if you want to take a screen grab of it. Okay, so we have, and yes, for semicolons and coordinating, the two clauses have equal weight. But again, more importantly, we're just checking to make sure that they're clauses that work. And then all of these would likely end in a period at some point. The last one to add to this would be subject, verb, possibly object, colon, and then we got a couple of options. So the key to a colon is that what comes before the colon is a complete thought, is an independent clause. Okay, so what's in front of it has to be a complete sentence. What comes after it, you have two options. Option one, you can have a list. That does not need to be a complete thought. Option two, subject, verb, object. So what follows a colon is either a list or another complete thought. The way that we can tell, and maybe not tell isn't the right word, but if what's going to follow is a list, then I should be able to read the word colon. The colon here basically reads as, for example. So as I read the sentence, I can replace the word colon, like I can replace the colon with the term, for example. If it's a second sentence, because the other use of a colon is kind of like an equals sign. It means that whatever came on the first half and the second half are equal. So for the second variation of it, the colon can be replaced with in other words. So it's essentially The second half has to be a restating, a re-explaining, or a different way of saying what was said in the first half. Yeah. So these are our basic core forms. Now it's important to note that, and so second, modifiers with cores. I'm just going to give us one set. We have modifiers that have cores. Let me don't need that many rows. Okay, here we go. These would be some sort of noun plus that, or noun. So this would be noun, that, verb, or you can have noun, that, subject, verb. You can have noun, comma, which, verb. You can have noun, comma, which, subject, verb. And then finally, I can have noun, comma, WH, comma or no comma. I should say noun, WH, verb, noun, comma, WH, verb. I'm going to give you some examples of these. Noun, WH, meaning WH word, right? Like whatever WH word. Who, when, where, the non-WH, non-which ones. Subject verb. Or noun with a comma. Yep, I totally can. Ready? You want to see some examples? Yep. So that's a perfect example, Donald. The carrots that my nephew eats are gross. The cookies that my sister bakes. The cookies, comma, which my sister baked. So we'll throw in a couple of examples of these. Let me toss them out here. So the cookies. No, we're going to the car that my sister owns is red. The car which my sister owns is red. The car that is red is for sale. The car which is red is for sale. The place that I call home is North Carolina. Or I'll say the house. I think that's the same. Those are the same ones, right? Oh, I need a place. The house where I grew up is for sale. The house, comma, where I grew up, comma, is for sale. The house, where often has its own verb. Nope. I can't drop a that. I wouldn't say carrots Brad cuts. That wouldn't make sense. It would be weird. If I want it to be a clause, I'd need a that there. No. You might find yourself saying that, but I would not ever see the GMAT say that. They would say that. They'll use that. So what I want you to know from this is that the word, the that, the which always uses a comma, where can go either way. The thing to note here is that so here's my noun, right? So I'm just going to think, this is just going to be my noun right now. Yes, I know it's the subject to my sentence. So the car is red. There's my subject verb. Inside of this that, I have an internal, in this case, subject verb for the descriptor of the car. Ditto here. My sister owns a car. Using a that versus a which is up to the author, not you. It's not your job to decide if it should be a that or a which. You just need to know that that never has a comma, which always does. But otherwise, you don't decide between that and which. You don't. That's not up to you. So just keep that in right. So if you've got the car, notice in this case, same sentence, the car, well, not same sentence, but is for sale. The car is for sale. This time, the that and the which only have an internal verb that takes as its subject the noun that's being described. So these relative pronouns can have an internal subject and verb or an internal verb that points to the described subject. I think what you're missing is the descriptor. Like, if you just say the carrots Brad cuts, it may, I mean, again, I think the key is make it clear to the reader. That is a clear modifier. And so we'll use it. I'm trying to think of an example where I would use when and where. With just a verb and not a subject verb. One's not coming to me, but it's not that you couldn't. It's just there's not one coming to me. You totally could. When running is different there. That's also kind of a yeah, I'm gonna have to think of one. Let me get back to you. I'm gonna think of one. Yeah. So I want to try a couple of sentences because we're well over, but I want to let y'all try a couple of sentences where we take some pieces apart. And so one of the ones I want to try, let's look at. I want you to see about finding the clock. Yeah, but so notice, see, exactly, the clock, when it strikes 12 noon, it's got a subject again, it. Usually, if you're going to use just a verb, it'd be like the clock cuckoos when it strikes noon, when it's sort of being used in a different, it's being used as a subordinator at that point. It's a little different. Just note that the ones where you're really going to end up with the testing on this would be who, which, and that. Where and when don't show up nearly as frequently. Like who still works here. The kids who live next door are friendly versus the kids who my sister babysits are friendly. Those are both fine. It's just that when and where are a little bit weird, to be honest. Like the house where my sister grew up, the house where, I don't know. It's like weird. It's so much. Those are strange descriptors. Just know that they are going to, the whens and wheres will almost always have their own internal core, like both subject and verb. Notice in this case, I've got the kids subject, our friendly verb. I've got the relative pronoun who. And then internally, it might have a subject verb, or it might just have the verb. Notice it's the kids live, right? It uses the same subject. Okay. Try this one. See if you can deconstruct this sentence and figure out what's going on. All right, so what word or words do y'all think might be wrong? Are there any issues with it? Yeah, you're finding the core. I want the core. And I want to know, how are my different subjects and verbs? So for core, I'm thinking any subjects and verbs. So I'm looking for the main core, and I'm looking for any relative pronoun cores. So I've got the threat, that's a subject. So I've got my first subject, the threat, and I'm looking for its verb. In the meantime, I come across of dehydration, prepositional phrase. But now I encounter a relative pronoun. I see that. Which threat? The threat that. Desert reptiles. Crap, that's a subject. Okay, so now I've got a new subject. So note that I've got a subject, but now I have another subject. So both of these subjects need verbs. Now, I've got such as, that seems like a descriptor, and it's offset with commas. So I'm going to kind of like read around that. And then I see the word faces, which hopefully is going to close out my little that. So that desert reptile's face. Ooh, it should be face, not faces. And result is the main verb. The threat results from the dry and hot environment. So my sentence is, my core is the threat results from, from the environment. That's my actual sentence. But then I have a little descriptor that desert reptiles face. So I've got subject, verb. I've got subject, verb. Thoughts. Thoughts. Totally. It's like a little bit of diagramming. So It is a verb here. Yep, it is a verb. The threat results, right? So the often we'd say like results in or results from. So you could say will result, right? But in this case, it is a verb. The threat results from this thing. The threat happens because of this thing. It's active. Passive voice requires was and were. It has to have a form of to be. So active versus passive really just has to do with the form of the verb. If we use the to be form, like if we use the helping verb was, were, or is. Right? Like, and again, I wouldn't worry about passive. The test does not test active versus passive at all, ever. You're just going to get yourself confused, I promise. There are so many weird verb tenses to deal with. I would throw out active versus passive from a thing you even investigate. And in fact, I wouldn't even think of progressive. I'd let progressive go too. I have never, ever, ever once made a single decision on any sentence correction question ever with the word passive versus active in my mind. Never. And I promise you don't need to. I swear to you. Okay. I know we're way over on time. I want to offer you just another example to try. Okay. So I want to try I want to try two broken down sentences because I want to practice a little bit more kind of just, can you help me find the core? I'm not worried about what the tense is. I'm not worried about whether it's active or passive or past or present, right? Like, I just want you to focus. So this gets back to the, like, right? Remember the piece here on the, where'd it go? Wait, I've lost it. Hold on, I'm coming back. I've lost my 4-step process. Where'd it go? Oh, I put it on the thing. That's right. That's where it was. I want you to focus, right? Focus on the one thing rather than all the shiny things. Focus on the one thing, right? I want you to find me the core. I just want you to find me the core. All right, what do you think? What do you think the main core? Nice. So I've got a subject, some engineers. Here's my subject. I've got a verb, and this doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes we can pull some extra words in, right? Like, that's fine. You're exactly right. Have been critical. What have they been? They've been critical. So we'll make all this like sort of our verb. And kind of object a little bit, but we'll make it our verb. Of the certification test conducted. So note that this of the certification test is prepositional phrase. Conducted is a descriptor. Even though it's a verbal, it's a participle, it's a descriptor. Which tests? The test conducted. The tests didn't conduct something themselves. What were they conducted? They were conducted by laboratories on the grounds that, oh, I see the word that, so I should double check and make sure that its core is okay, that the inspection subject, or sorry, the inspection conditions applied to products exceeds, there's my verb. So which conditions? The ones that were applied. Applied where? To products. Right, so that's all descriptor as well. What does it exceed? It exceeds those. And then again, yet another one, that consumers could duplicate. I have 3 sets of subjects and verbs. Some engineers have been critical. The conditions exceeds. Consumers could duplicate. What do you notice in those cores? How's the first one? Some engineers have been critical. How's that one look? That one okay? Yep, that one's fine. How's my second one? The conditions exceeds. Yeah, that's not okay, right? Like, should be the conditions exceed. Boop. And then our last one is okay. Consumers could duplicate. So we found not every verb needs an object. That part can be kind of like squishy. My sister bakes for fun. That doesn't quite have an object. The for fun is more of a descriptor. I appreciate you looking for it, but we don't need the object necessarily. All right, one more. We don't need this version of it yet. Okay. What you think? What's the main subject of my sentence, do you think? Yeah. So I've got a fossil. There's my main subject, a fossil. Now I've got this that, right? So that features. So this verb is sort of pointing back to that subject. That's a verb here. So this is my subject. Now this is the verb inside the that, but the fossil suggests another that, but this one is attached to the verb. What does it suggest? It suggests that the snakes evolved from this rather than from this other thing. So we've got a whole comparison, and you cannot see what I'm drawing. We have a whole kind of comparison thing happening at the end. So I have my main core sentence reads, A fossil suggests that the snakes evolved from X rather than Y. And I might include that last little piece. I mean, not for the core, right? I just threw that in. Because this is like, oh, wait, there's like this kind of, for me to understand what the sentence is trying to say, there's some sort of comparison. So my main core, a fossil suggests that the snakes evolved from something. Yep. Nice, y'all. Nicely done. Nicely done. Oh, yeah, there's all kinds of stuff wrong with it. Fear not, right? Oh, no, there's all kinds of parallelism stuff wrong with the end of this sentence. But we found the core. That's the important part. Yeah, no. This sentence is broken. But it's broken for parallelism, not for core. All right, let me give you one more so you can see kind of a weird structure that we haven't looked at yet. Here you go, and then we will wrap it up. I could do sentence correction all night. I love this stuff. Even if it is like middle school diagramming sentence hell. Mm-hmm. Yep. So notice this whole first part is an upfront descriptor. Anxious about declining student test scores and frustrated by some teachers' lack of commitment to improving results. That's all a big descriptor. The school board, there's my subject. The school board implemented. What do they implement? They implemented an after school program. Now I do see the word that, so I always check, right? So I've got that requires. So the program requires, yeah, that fits, subject verb. Yep. Right? As long as it's like whatever that touches when it's a noun, like that. But yeah, my whole sentence, my core is the school board implemented. That requires the teachers of underachieving students to be tutored. Okay, we can look at like a weird, like, do we require someone to be something? Do we require that? Do we require, right? So there might be some other issues here, but for our main core, we're set. Okay, so here's what I want y'all to do. Here is your structure cheat sheet. You want to make sure that you're practicing, looking for, right, and reading up on what is like, and I call this object clause that uses the word that, semicolons, colons, coordinating and subordinating conjunctions. Look up these lists. Here are your modifiers that have cores. These are relative pronouns. So these are your relative pronouns. Now, when I say markers, what I mean by markers is that you are trying to train your brain. So we want, I should add here, semicolons and colons are the things that we really are looking for. What I would say if I were you is you're trying to train your brain to notice some of these structures without having to actually read for them. So the word that is a really great one to start with. So what I would do is say, okay, I'm going to take the word that, and today I'm going to look for the word that in everything I read. Every time I think of it, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, let me go look and see if I can find the word that. All day. Again, like I won't end up doing it all day, just as I think of it, like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm supposed to be looking for the word that today. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm not trying to fix it. You can think about deconstructing sentences. Just be careful because not everything you read, like other people's emails, are always well written. So if you are going to deconstruct sentences, do so with high quality, like news articles. Not even like newspaper are usually good enough. I'm like AP maybe is good enough. So if something is written by like Reuters or AP, okay. But if you're already working on things like The Economist or Scientific American or any of those to try and up your reading level for reading comp, then you can absolutely, as you're looking for these markers, also deconstruct sentences there. But what you want to do is for some of this is just like, okay, I've chosen the word that, and I'm just going to look for it so that I can tell my brain that it's an important word to notice. Or I might choose one of the fanboys. Like I might choose but or yet or for. Or I might choose one of these subordinating conjunctions, although or because. Or I might say semicolons. All day today, I'm just going to see if I notice semicolons and colons. You are trying to teach your brain to like flag those items and catch them, right? And so you don't have to keep thinking, oh, right, I need to look for that. Oh, that's right, I need to look for a semicolon. So that during the test, your mind is already, your eyes are already actively looking for it. A pro move. See if you can find that after a verb. 5 and 4. Oh, semicolon, although, should not be used. That would be wrong. I would use one or the other. I mean, that'd be a weird sentence structure if I was using a semicolon and an although. Because what comes after the semicolon should stand as its own sentence completely, every word. So if I said, I'm just going to stick it out here so it's not whatever messing up one of our pages. If I said, my sister bakes cakes, semicolon, although my brother my sister bakes my brother delicious cakes, or I got one. My sister cooks cooks steaks for my brother. Although my brother is a vegetarian. I don't even have a brother, but whatever. There we go. This, although my brother is a vegetarian, is not a complete sentence. So this would be wrong. My options would be to say, I'm going to just copy it so I don't have to keep typing it. My sister cooks steaks for my brother, comma, although, sorry, I'm going to put it here. Although he, I shouldn't have had a comma. All right. My sister cooks steaks for my brother, although he is a vegetarian. Or it would be weird to use a semicolon in this example because the although matters, because the although creates meaning. And so now just using a semicolon sounds like an and. My sister cooks steaks for my brother and he's a vegetarian. Like those two things don't make sense together. So I'd want something like, my sister cooks steaks for my brother, comma, but he is a vegetarian. My sister cooks steaks for my brother, comma, even though or despite the fact or although he's a vegetarian. Or I could rearrange this one. I could say, although he is a vegetarian, is how we might be more used to seeing this. My sister cooks, this is actually not, although my brother is a vegetarian, I'd have to change the order of this. My brother is a vegetarian. My sister cooks steaks for him. Which is weird. But I would not put a semicolon with an although. Nope. That would be like doing semicolon and, or right, like these things are equivalents. So I can choose to use a semicolon. I can choose to use a comma and. I can choose to use a subordinating conjunction, or I can choose to use a semicolon. So just to like set these aside, this is the section on punctuation. So if you want to take a screen grab of this, these would all be punctuation. Sort of. I mean, I know the comma and, but the comma part is extremely important for these. But you wouldn't use any of these in tandem. You would choose one. All right, friends, we are wickedly over. Holy camole. Holy camole. So over. Crazy town. I'm going to get so yelled at. So anyways, yep, I can totally, let me put the markers back up for you. 1 second. And so if you want to grab, and actually, here we go. Let me see if I can set this up so that you can see it. Let me make this, here we go. I will, for my peeps in the room, there you go. It's on slide, maybe if it would let me in there. It's on slide 4. There you go. It's on slide 4. So that way you can have some cheat sheets for later. You're welcome. Yay. So just note that we have all kinds of amazing free options available to you. Lots and lots and lots of free options. If you have not done so, please, by all means, go on our website. So go where you signed up for this. You can sign up for all kinds of free resources. If you go to manhattanprep.com.gmat or /GMAT/resources, you can try our on-demand interact. You can try out any of our classes for free. You can also come to our free trials of all kinds of stuff. So if you follow the link to GMAT /classes /free, you can try anything for free, right? We've got all kinds of free stuff available to you. Otherwise, thank you so much, y'all. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your night. I'm going to stop this recording and we will see you around at the next free prep hour.